Hello and a very warm welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you're all having a lovely day or have had a lovely day. We're going to be doing a film review, and this one is one of my favourite childhood films. It's one of those films that holds a special place in many people's hearts. It's, as you saw from the title card, Stand By Me. Now, Stand By Me is based on a Stephen King book. The book is called Different Seasons, and it has several well-known short stories in there, one of them being Shawshank Redemption. Now, the film goes as far back as 1983, which is when it originally went into production and when the screenplay started being written. And it was going to be called The Body, which was the same name as the title book. But the producers were worried it gave off the wrong impression of what the film was about. It sounded more like an adult film or a sex film. And now the original director at that point wasn't Rob Reiner, who actually directed the film. It was somebody called Adrian Lyne. Now, he did a very well-known film called Flashdance and several other well-known films. But due to exhaustion and coming off doing a lot of films in a row, he stepped down, and that was when Rob Reiner stepped in, and he chose a name after a very classic song. It's a Benny King song called Stand By Me. And that's where the name of the film came from. And over 300 people auditioned to be in the movie. And there was one person that Rob Reiner was absolutely certain of, and that was River Phoenix, who played Chris Chambers. When he chatted to River Phoenix, who actually originally auditioned to play Will Wheaton, he was talking about his childhood, growing up in Oregon. And that's when he got to know River more. He was like, no, you have to play Chris Chambers. You're perfect for the part, because he had this sensitive side to him as well as having this soft, gentle side. Other people who auditioned were Will Wheaton, who played Gordy LaChance, Jerry O'Connell, who played Vern Tesso, and then you had Corey Feldman, who played Teddy DeChamp. They had to audition several times for the part, and they auditioned with different other actors to see how they bounced off them, to see where the chemistry was, and to see if they were right for the part. There are other people in the film that you may not be aware of that were actually in the film. One of them was actually John Cusack. He had a very small part in the film, and he played Gordy LaChance's brother. But the two scenes that he were in are actually very pivotal scenes to the movie, because they show you what Gordy LaChance, who's one of the main characters, was going through and what his family life was like. So even though he was only in it briefly, he was in two of the important scenes of the movie. Another actor who's in the film that you may have been aware of is Kiefer Sutherland. He plays one of the greasers, one of the villains, and you probably know him from 24, the television series that was on a few years ago. Will Wheaton said in an interview that Rob Reiner chose very well for the parts of the film, because each actor played the characters that represented their life. So you had River Phoenix, who played this sort of tough guy, and he was like the leader of the pack and was very protective of all the other people, but he also had that sensitive side. You had Will Wheaton, who said that he was still trying to find himself. He was a bit uncomfortable in his skin. He was still learning about himself. He was geeky. He was nerdy. And then you had Corey Feldman, who came from quite a chaotic household. And he came from a troubled home. He wasn't treated very nicely by his parents. And he had a lot of anger in him. So he played the part of Teddy Jump perfectly. And then you had Jerry O'Connell, who was like the funny one of the group, and he played Vern Tesso absolutely perfect. They all did. They all played the parts really well. And you can see the chemistry and the friendship they had on screen came across perfectly in the film. And that was because before filming took place, Rob Reiner insisted that the actors spend some time together to get to know each other, to kind of know what each other's like, to kind of bounce off each other, and to get an idea about each other. And that's why the friendship in the film came across so perfectly, because you can see that they were all sort of having a laugh with each other, they're all connecting really well together. And that's because they spent quite a bit of time with each other before filming took place. The film, as you know, was released, I think it was the summer of 1986, and it was released in 1987 in the UK. There are several differences between the book and the film, which I'll go through. The book, which Stephen King has said he kind of based on his life. The book, as I mentioned earlier, was called The Body, and it was a short story about a writer struggling in his life and struggling to grow up and not having the love and support from his family that he longed for. And that's why he spent a lot of time with his friends. So the main character is a writer, like Stephen King said, and he's always said that he sort of based the book on his life. The differences between the book and the film, and this is one of the main differences that you'll pick up on, especially if you read the book, is the relationship between Gordy and his brother. In the book, it's kind of portrayed that because Denny LaChance is older than his younger brother Gordy, they weren't that close, and that comes across quite clearly in the book, that he kind of viewed his older brother as an acquaintance, as someone that he saw from time to time, because he was never really home, he was always out. So the closeness wasn't there. Whereas in the film, they are extremely close. He looks up to his older brother. His brother is the one that gives him the attention, the love that he doesn't get from his parents. And there's two pivotal scenes in the film where you can clearly see that. One of them is at the beginning of the film, when he walks into his brother's room to find the canteen that his father said is in his brother's room, and it kind of flashes back to him and his brother being in the bedroom, and his brother gives him the baseball cap, and there's some beautiful music in the background that is played to kind of emphasize the sort of emotional aspect of that scene. And he says, "This is your lucky cap," and he gives it to him, and Gordy says, no, it's yours. He said, no, it looks good on you. And he says, "Oh, I'm going to take you fishing. Do you know any fish we're going to catch?" And then they give each other a hug, and you can see in that scene how happy Gordy is and how much he loves his brother. And then suddenly the scene's interrupted by his father, which takes him back to reality, where he's here without his brother, and all he has is his mum and dad. But he's the invisible boy. They don't notice him. They're trapped in their grief over Denny's death, that they don't really care about him. In that moment, you can see how sad he is and how lonely he feels, because his brother's not here anymore. And that's why these friendships that he has are very important to him. These 4 friendships that he has is everything to him, because it's his way of escaping his house and having some company. And Chris Chambers is one of his closest friends. He really looked after Gordy and looked out for him and wanted Gordy to succeed, because he knew that he was going to go somewhere in life, whereas he came from a bad family. His whole family were considered bad. They were bad seeds. His brothers got into trouble. His dad was an alcoholic. And here was somebody, a friend of his, who had a lot of potential, and he didn't want him to waste it. So their friendship is very important. Another pivotal scene that's really important is when they're in the junkyard and Gordy goes to get some food. And there's another flashback scene, and now this gives you more of an insight to Gordy's relationship with his parents. Denny was considered the football star, and all the attention was leaked on him, and Gordy was completely ignored. Now, in this scene, Denny sticks up for his brother and wants his parents to focus on his brother. He's written a story, and Denny was really proud of him, really liked the book, and wanted his parents to know it. But his dad completely blanks Gordy and goes, this is what happens. All his attention is focused somewhere else. He needs to be focusing on his football career. So he basically says to his wife, shouldn't be talking about girls, because now his attention is elsewhere. So he wants him to focus on his football career. So again, you get to see again what his family life was like and why it's so important for him to hang out with his friends. There's another quite moving scene when they're walking along the railway tracks, and Gordy finds out that Chris is going to do the shop courses. Not wants to, but is being told that he's going to do the shop courses because he's not considered very bright. And Gordy says, no, you can't. We stick together. I will join you. And Chris gets annoyed because he knows how much potential his friend has got, that he's not going to throw his life away and come down and be with us. He's going to go and do great things. So he gets quite annoyed and tells them, don't throw it away, because it's basically the line that he says is, it's arsehole if your friends drag you down. And he doesn't want to drag him down. He wants him to go and do great things, and tells him what a great writer you're going to be. And that's such a lovely scene to me, and it's such a moving scene as well, because again, you get to feel how lonely and scared Gordy feels, because he's scared that if his friends go and do the shop courses, he'll have nobody. He feels very alone at home. He's not getting any attention from his parents. He's lost his brother, who was the only one that gave him the attention at home, that really cared about him. So you get that sense of how lonely and upset he feels, but Chris is pushing him. He's pushing him because he wants him to succeed. And it's such a lovely scene. There is another very famous scene as well in the movie. It's a scene when Chris is sitting by the tree, and it's after Gordy has a dream again about his brother, and his father says to him, it should have been you that died. And that again symbolises that he feels very, very unloved by his father, and he wakes up, and that's when he sees his friend sitting by a tree, and he starts crying because everyone sees him. Basically, Chris feels that everyone sees him as bad. He talks about the milk money, and he says yes, he took it, but he tried to give it back, but then the teacher took it from him and bought a new skirt with it, and he feels very betrayed because obviously the teacher didn't own up to it, and everybody pointed the finger at him. And Gordy puts his arms around him and kind of gives him a cuddle. And apparently, during that scene, it had to be shot several times because River couldn't get his emotions out. He couldn't cry. So Rob Reiner said cut and went up to River and said, think of a time when a grown-up or an adult that you trusted let you down, and let that emotion come out. And River started crying. It all came out, which is which brought out that famous scene. And when the camera stopped rolling, Rob Reiner said he had to go up and give River a hug because he couldn't stop crying. And Rob Reiner realised it was obviously something very, very upsetting because he couldn't stop crying. He kind of thought that maybe was he thinking about his mum or dad or something. He didn't know, and he never asked him. And he said that was one of his regrets, that he wished he asked him what it was that upset him so much. But it did bring out the emotion in the film, and it's one of the famous scenes in the film. Another scene in the movie as well was that train scene. And Rob Reiner said that when Vern Tesso and Gordy were running along the train tracks, apparently they were laughing so much and having such a good time that Rob got so angry that he went up to both the actors and basically said, "Stop fucking up my scene. You know, come on, this is an expensive scene," and started shouting at them until they cried. And then he just turned back around and said, "Action." So yeah, that's another scene as well in the film, which is quite a good scene. It's quite not a funny scene, but it is quite funny when Vern loses his comb and turns to Gordy and goes, "I lost the comb," and then Gordy says, "Forget it." Vern is the comic relief character in the film, but actually in the book, he's not portrayed like that at all. He's portrayed just like all the other characters, but in the movie, they decided to have a more comic relief character. Because in the book, he isn't chubby, he doesn't do anything funny. But yes, in the film, that's how they decided to portray him. There's a couple of other differences in the book which I will mention, but I just want to quickly mention the swamp scene. That was actually man-made because they couldn't find a swamp that matched the description of the book. So they basically man-made this swamp, filled it with leeches, and told the actors to swim across it while they filmed that scene. The other two differences that I'm just going to mention before I sort of wrap this review up is in the book, towards the end, when the greasers find them and find the body, it's not Chris that holds the gun like he does in the book. It's actually Gordy that comes out with the gun. I think they changed that to kind of give Gordy a bit of strength so that he can stand up for himself, because basically in the book he comes across as sort of more of a sensitive soul, not one of the tougher characters, whereas Chris Chambers is the one that's portrayed as the really, really tough one. But they decided to kind of give Gordy the gun to kind of give him a bit of that toughness and a bit of that strength back. Another difference that I actually forgot to mention is slightly earlier on, during the train dodge scene, it is Gordy that rescues Teddy Duchamp from the train tracks, not Chris, whereas in the film it's Chris that rescues him. Towards the end of the film, now this is one of the sort of poignant scenes in the film, because if you know what happened to the actor River Phoenix in real life, he died from a drug overdose 8 years after filming Wrapped. So this film is sort of considered his film, and a lot of people see it as a sort of portrayal of what his life was like. He was seen in real life as sort of a troubled soul that had a lot of problems, and that's one of the reasons why he ended up dying 8 years later. But it's towards the end when they're all sort of dispersing home, when Gordy and Chris talk, and it's sort of quite sad because they have a voiceover who tells them what happens to all the people. If you read the book, you'll know that pretty much all the characters, apart from Gordy LeChance, die. But whereas in the book, they all go on, it says Vern goes on, gets married and has several kids. Teddy Duchamp tries to make it in the army, but he couldn't because of his hearing loss. He ends up taking odd jobs around Castle Rock. Then it goes on as sort of Chris kind of disappears off into the distance and sort of waves goodbye to Gordy, that he ended up going on to the courses with Gordy LeChance, then ends up going on to university and trained up to become a lawyer. And it says that he always tried to make the best of the piece. And I think that's one of the reasons why earlier on in the scene that they chose to have Chris sort of rescue Teddy Duchamp from the train tracks, so that Gordy to kind of highlight the fact that he was one that liked to make peace. He didn't like people fighting. So yes, at the end he tries to break up a fight, but he gets stabbed and he basically dies and disappears. And for a lot of people that scene's quite sad because it kind of symbolises what happened to River, that he disappears off. He dies 8 years later, so it kind of sort of parodies what happens to River in real life. But it's one of those films that kind of stays with you. When I first saw that film, I think I was about 6 years old when I first saw it, and I was at my Charmaine's house, and she decided to play the film, and it stayed with me. And for years later, I was trying to find this film that I saw about a group of lads walking across a railroad tracks, and all I remember is that and what happens to the main character in the film, that he dies at the end. I was like, what's the name of the film? And I tried to find it for years, and by chance my dad said, oh, is there anything you want me to tape on VHS for you tonight? I just came across the name of this film, Stand By Me. I thought, oh, Dad, tape this film. Can you tape it for me? And then I watched it the next day. I thought, this is the film. So it's one of those films that does stay with you. It never leaves you. It's one of those films that you have to watch. It really is one of those coming of age films that you have to watch. And it's so beautifully done. And it really highlights, what kids were like. There are certain scenes where they're talking about cartoon characters. And then when they're at the junkyard, they're talking about women. They're behaving like kids do behave. They're having fun. They're going out on adventures, which is what a lot of kids want to do. And everybody who was in that film plays the part perfectly. And it's such a beautiful film that I really recommend. If you haven't watched it, watch the film. And I also do recommend you reading the book, because it does give you more insight into the character Gordy and what his life at home is like. So yes, I definitely recommend it for you. And thank you so much for watching this film. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much, and have a lovely evening or a lovely day, and see you soon.